Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamira Burley, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Brea Baker. And today we're talking about Hurricane Katrina as we honor and hold space for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, it's been 2 decades since the old Kanye got on national television to proclaim that George Bush hates Black people in the wake of Black New Orleans residents being deserted during this time of tragedy. And he wasn't wrong. Side note, man, do I miss when Kanye used to speak truth to power and wasn't a white supremacist in sheep's clothing. But I digress. In the last few weeks, a few documentaries have been released, shedding even more light on how Black people were failed during and following Hurricane Katrina. And we need to get into it all. But of course, let's start with some headlines.
Yeah. I see you decided to go positive this morning.
I just need it. I'm like, I need to pump something good into these veins because there's so much else to be depressed over.
Yeah, you're the light, I'm the dark today.
Look, we need the balance because it's like it's not all roses and sugar and stuff like that. But yeah, Black women have been killing it at the U.S. Open, and I've been loving to see it. First headline is that Venus Williams became the oldest player in the U.S. Open since, I believe, 1981. So it's been quite a few decades before we've had someone in their 40s playing at the U.S. Open. And it's incredible to see her being the one and for her dominating in such a big way, even though she was just pushed out and has not advanced further. But it was another Black woman on the team. So it's like, you're rooting for Venus, but also happy for Taylor Townsend. Speaking of Taylor Townsend, she showed so much grace in the face of those really racist remarks from her singles opponent. And so I love to see that even though she was pushed out of the singles, that she's advancing so far in the doubles. So just really excited for Black women. And obviously I'll just get this last headline out of the way too, because it's also US Open related, which is that Naomi Osaka has also advanced the furthest at the US Open since giving birth 2 years ago. So it's just such a moment for Black women from all backgrounds, of all ages, of all phases of their careers. And to see, Naomi killing it in the singles, Taylor Townsend and her doubles partner killing it in that element. I'm just like, I want to see Black women holding those trophies and getting those checks.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that, despite age, despite pregnancy, despite racism, Black women continue to find a way to succeed and be uplifted and to show up and show out, hone their craft.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be distracted by the headlines and the negative attention, which I'm going to get to. But it's, I think, moments like this, and I think I've committed to going to the US Open next year.
Yes, girl, let's do it together. I need that honey juice.
Right? That would be so much fun. We could take the baby. Because we need moments of celebration. And watching Naomi kill it. I remember watching her documentary a few years ago, her talking about depression and her really struggling with mental health issues. And now just watching her prove all the naysayers wrong. Yeah. And Venus is always just a powerhouse. And 45, it gives me inspiration that age does not define how successful I can be. I can redefine myself constantly over and over again and still show up as so successful. I didn't realize she was 45. She looks amazing.
She looks so freaking good. And her doubles partner is 22.
Wow. Okay.
Layla Fernandez is a 22-year-old Canadian player. So it's just to see them playing next to each other. And it's not that Layla is carrying Venus. Venus is crushing it out there with someone who is basically half her age.
Love it.
And they advanced really far in the doubles. It's definitely an affirmation that all this, stuff of hitting your prime early and then everything after that, no, fuck that. No.
It sounds like the patriarchy, infringing on our joy and happiness, trying to tell us that we've reached our prime. Therefore, we have to, retire into a dark corner somewhere. And, Black women are showing that's not the case for us.
No.
I'm actually
infringing on our joy.
They are trying to infringe on our joy and our pockets, which is why the first article I'm going to talk about is an article that has raised headlines across most major news networks. And the fact that a new report from the labor statistic came out that around 300, it was originally reported as 300,000, but now it's around 319,000 Black women have been pushed or forced out of the labor force. While at the same time, 365,000 white men have entered the labor force and have absorbed many of those jobs. And it is so not a coincidence, right? This has happened in the last 3 months, particularly happened in the last 3 months of the Trump administration decimating the federal government and many of the federal jobs that Black women participated in. They're decimating funding that's going to local communities. And we know that Black women lead a lot of nonprofits and social impact organizations, and a lot of funding going to local services that also impacts a lot of industries that are mostly held by Black women. And it's extremely frustrating watching this dismantling of our community, because Black women are oftentimes the head of the household. And this is not just going to impact their pocketbooks, it's going to impact the pocketbooks of their families, of their communities, and to the organizations and the charities that they give to, because Black women give often and give a lot. And so, when I saw this headline, I was just like, this is not a coincidence, right? Like Donald Trump has ushered in this world in which DEI has been seen as like this negative, distasteful word or phrase or program, not recognizing that the lack of DEI is actually DEI for white men, right? Like is ushering in the fact that these are oftentimes unqualified men who get jobs over minorities because they happen to be white. And we're seeing that happen in droves or in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, you said that. That's real. It is just DEI for white men. And the fact that the numbers are so close, it's just so hard to be able to ignore and try and explain away that nearly the exact amount of jobs that Black women have lost, white women have gained, their success often comes at our expense.
Yep.
And so any version of America that Trump is trying to make greater for white people will mean that we are going to be the stools that they're stepping on to get up. And we did an episode where we got to talk to Anna Gifty about some of this dynamic that was before the New York Times piece had come out, but back when some of the initial data was surfacing. And so if you have not listened to that episode, y'all should go back and explore it. Anna Gifty is an incredible economist, author of a book called The Double Tax. And so we got
to excited to get a copy.
Yeah, same. So we got to dig into that. But yeah, just the more that it's just depressing.
It is depressing, but even more importantly, it's a direct attack, right? Donald Trump is intentionally attacking Black women. In this case, this is coming after we know that Black women are the fastest growing educated population in this country, and are oftentimes the ones that are leading the movements, like leading the marches, leading the organizing. And what happens when you now force people who don't have extra income, extra time, and now their sole focus is on trying to survive, it's very hard for them to now organize the marches, right? And I know so many amazing, highly educated Black women who have been let go. And it's taking them 6 months to a year to find another job.
Yeah. And this is already an economy that even outside of the attacks on DEI and the federal cuts is already an economy because of the tariffs and other decisions that Trump has made that is really tough on us. And so to go through that period, being highly educated, underemployed, but dealing with all of these extra expenses that the Trump administration is pushing onto consumers, it's a dangerous time for Black women to be in this position. It means that we're competing for even less opportunities, and that companies and corporations feel less of a mandate and a responsibility to hire and collaborate with and listen to us. So all of that talk of listen to Black women, pay Black women, trust Black women, it's clearly all a marketing.
It was a marketing ploy, just like, social impact oftentimes is through the lens of the corporations, right? Is that they get to decide what's in the best interest of our communities. And we oftentimes feel the negative backlash of their incompetence of actually implementing quality programs.
Say that.
It's just another day in America. In our last article for this lineup is the U.S. military kills 11 in a strike on an alleged drug boat that was tied to the Venezuelan cartel. And I say alleged because Donald Trump and his administration has presented no evidence. And this look from all the clips that have been surfacing, as well as the video that was released by the White House, it seems as if it was a speedboat that was in international waters. And for many people, they consider this an act of war, an act of terrorism, right? The fact that the Trump administration has presented no quantifiable evidence, and he's been making gestures or throwing shade at the Venezuelan administration, saying that they're corrupt and terrorists, while many of the actions he's trying to criticize are actually things his administration has actually done.
Yeah.
And many people are speculating that this is an opportunity for the Trump administration to try to infringe on the Venezuelan population and take advantage of their oil reserve. You know, an age tale in America. It's all about the oil. It's all about infringing on other people's civil liberties. Mind you, Venezuela is a sovereign nation, meaning they have their own government, they operate their own laws, and for an outside government to try to come in and do so is a violation of international law.
Yeah.
And in violation of national law. I actually think we have policies and practices that prevents these types of acts. And for him to take a unilateral decision without involving Congress is pretty disturbing. And you know, it makes me think about an interview he did in the White House a few weeks ago, where he was basically like, "Oh, so if we're at war, I don't have to step down as president, right? Like, what are we doing?"
Plotting. He's definitely plotting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything he does circumvents what is supposed to be checks and balances and law. And, you know, it is scary to think of what 2028 is going to look like. Whether peaceful, we didn't have a peaceful transition.
2026.
2020.
2026 first.
True. Exactly. We got to get to the midterms. But yeah, it's like if in 2020 transition was an insurrection, I'm scared to imagine what it looks like when Democrats and progressives try and take back federal seats in 2026 and 2028, and what methods he's going to use to get around that too. It is just you see why I had to start with the U.S. Open. I do.
Take a step from you next week and find some more lovable, heartwarming news. But the reality is I feel the need to make sure that everyone wakes up with all the facts.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Don't shy away from it. I feel like that balance is really important for us to bring. Because if we disillusion ourselves and try and look away from what's happening, then they'll be at our door, breaking it down. And they already are. If you are a DC resident, that's already been happening. Again, we just did an episode on that last week. They're talking about coming to Chicago and Baltimore and other cities. So it's a scary time. And the answer is not to disillusion ourselves by thinking that we can, meditate our way out of it. Like we have to be aware and fight back. So I'm glad you did bring it together.
Everyone but us.
Well,
so we're going to take a quick break.
Yeah. See, we're on the same page. Let's take a break. We'll come right back. You're watching The Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.
Alone.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. We just finished unpacking some of the latest headlines, some more positive than others. But it's time to talk about Hurricane Katrina. 20 years later, and in hindsight, what we have learned and what has been revealed about America's treatment of Black lives in moments of crisis.
Yeah, let's take it back to August 29th, 2005. I can't believe 20 years have actually passed already, because it feels like this was such a pivotal moment. The way that I'll never forget where I was during 9/11. I'll never forget seeing what I saw on the news and watching this all play out on TV and feeling like, what is happening in this nation? So Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 125 miles per hour, hitting the Southeast and the Gulf, mainly Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and of course, New Orleans. It wasn't just a storm that devastated New Orleans, though. It was the levee system that failed catastrophically. 80% of the city was flooded, with some neighborhoods like the Lower Ninth Ward completely submerged. And surprise, surprise, most of those neighborhoods were predominantly Black.
Yep. According to the Brookings Institute, 67% of the population funded was, to your point, Blacks or African Americans. 1,800 people lost their lives. Over 1 million people were displaced. And those who were hit the hardest were overwhelmingly Black, elderly, low income. And that's not by accident. That is by design, as everything is in this country.
Yeah. And even before the storm hit, Black residents in New Orleans were already twice as likely to live in poverty and less likely to have access to a car, which made evacuation next to impossible. There was a lot of critique of, well, why are people still there? And when you don't develop infrastructure and access for people to get out, you can't then blame survivors and the victims for not getting out in time. Yep. One American Public Health Association study found that 55% of New Orleans households didn't have the resources to evacuate, even if they wanted to. So this whole victim blaming game that we've seen during and after Hurricane Katrina is really frustrating. And it's not unlike what we see in other crises.
Yeah. And I remember, being 15 when this was happening. I had no concept of like the magnitude of what was going on, neither during when it happened or like the aftermath of days and weeks that went on. But I just remember thinking, like, why is the mayor calling for Amtrak to come to town? Like, he's calling for the trains to come in and like scoop people up, because to your point, they did not have the infrastructure, which is why so many people who were being criminalized for staying behind is a deliberate misinterpretation of the facts. Remember those infamous headlines showing white people finding food while Black people were looting? And then you had the racial double standard that continued on broadcast, national broadcast, where every channel was framing this response as almost like a personal disaster against the individual versus like, this happened by nature, but the infrastructure of the city did not enable for people to actually be able to protect themselves, their families, and their communities. And we saw this devastating effect ripple through that community in real time.
Yeah, exactly. And that response, it took 5 days for the federal government to get water and basic supplies to people at the Superdome and the convention center. That's been one of the most harrowing things to really come to terms with, and seeing some of the footage, which we are going to get into later, but just realizing people were sleeping on urine-soaked floors. People didn't have food. Babies didn't have formula, hygiene products, medical support, no electricity. So on top of dealing with this really horrible flood water that people were wading through, literally, you get to a place of safety which your government doesn't even want you to be in. And there's no resources there either. It's like a tent city inside of a stadium, with nothing to really offer people in the richest country in the world. Like it's the more that I think about it, the more my skin crawls just to imagine tens of thousands of Black people, crowded into these spaces with very little aid. And they are sending news cameras and National Guardsmen before they are sending actual support.
Yeah, it was so disturbing. I mean, even the stories now that still continue to come out about there was the storm, there was the lack of government response, but then you had the tragedies that occurred in the Superdome as a response of the lack of oversight. And you know, going back to the lack of government response, one study from the Congressional Quarterly found that FEMA had no evacuation plan in place for those without access to cars, despite knowing for years that floods were a real risk, right? That we knew that the levees were unsustainable. That wasn't a failure of logistics, that's a failure of values and a failure of us, our inability to put our money where it needs to be, especially in regards to like protecting our solvent nation, like, and the people who live within it, including Black folks.
Yeah, it's scary. I just have to take a deep breath because we're seeing so much of this play out in the aftermath with now wildfires and other hurricanes since. And so it just feels very reminiscent of Black people just being stranded, left to their own devices. And again, we can't forget other infamous moments like then President George W. Bush praising FEMA Director Michael Brown by saying, "Brown, you're doing a heck of a job." People were dying in the streets. They're patting each other on the back from the comfort of Washington, D.C. And it just shows such a disregard for the lived reality and on the ground experience. Because during this time, I mean, yeah, people are being shot for trying to find food. People, like it was a really scary
mind you, food that was already going to go to waste.
Right.
Food that was already going to go bad.
This country's obsession with protecting assets and real estate, and that's not yours, is mind-blowing. During a crisis, it should be all hands on deck. Whatever can be provided to keep people alive, we should be providing. And the reality was that, you know, those in power were more interested in saying mine and getting territorial about it, which was really,
Yeah, which is why we know that the trauma didn't end when the water receded, right? Entire Black communities were erased in the so-called rebuilding process. Public housing was demolished, residents were relocated across the country, and schools converted to charter systems, often displacing Black teachers and administrators in the process. When I was in my junior year of high school, we had 2 students from New Orleans come as a result. They were victims of Hurricane Katrina. And I think that made it very real for me, seeing people who could not go back to their homes, had nothing but whatever they had in their backpack when they left, and how the community, the larger community of the United States, not the government, rallied around helping to support them.
We keep us safe. We fill in the voids that the government's not going to fill. But it's often not enough to overcome the just immense neglect, because the New York Times reported that over 100,000 Black residents were never able to return to New Orleans. What's there now? Where their homes used to be, where their businesses used to be, gentrified neighborhoods, luxury condos, a city that celebrates its culture for Mardi Gras when they can profit off of it, but not the people who created that culture, who were left stranded, left for dead.
Yeah, I mean, even now, 20 years later, New Orleans has fewer Black residents than it did pre-Katrina, and the racial wealth gap has grown. According to the data center, the data center of New Orleans, the median income for Black households is less than half of white households. How, Sway?
That is scary. What? Like, what are we really talking about here? Less than half? And this isn't just about Katrina. Again, as we've been alluding to this whole time, it's about how America responds to disasters and who it is deeming worth saving. We saw it in Flint. We saw it during COVID. We saw it after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. We saw it with the wildfires. Black and brown people are in crisis, and urgency disappears. When wealthy millionaires and billionaires are in crisis, it's all hands on deck, bring out the violins, and it's not that I'm trying to create the suppression Olympics, but the government does it when it has these disproportionate responses to Black pain versus white pain, to working class loss versus wealthy loss. And so it's normalized for us. Oh, you're used to that. So we don't feel anything new for you. Folks in Flint have been trying to get clean water for how long?
Too long.
Over a decade. I mean, Little Miss Flint was like a child. She's like off to college. Like, it's just, it is such a really dangerous pattern that we have to disrupt.
Yeah, and one thing that I think we always miss the mark on is it's not like we're asking for charity, right? We're asking for our taxpayer dollars to do their job. We all put into the pot of money that enables for the United States government to function, operate. And so when we're in crisis, we expect the services that we've been funding for our entire lives to finally show up for us. The fact that you have people standing on the roof of their homes begging for food, the fact that there were stories about white folks driving around in boats shooting Black folks for no other reason than the fact that they thought it was a joyous occasion and it was something fun to do. The fact that you had little girls being assaulted in the Superdome, right? Like all of these things could have been prevented had the government gave a damn about Black folks, which is why this anniversary is not just a moment of remembrance, it's a moment of reckoning, because we don't just want to radically shift how we prepare, but also we need to radically shift how we respond to crisis, because we're going to see this pattern happen over and over again. And to those who pay the price are often people who look like us. And the federal government now defunding climate relief, now defunding like research and efforts to reduce our climate footprint. We're going to see more storms. The waters will continue to rise, and who will feel the blunt of that impact will be us.
Yep, always us. But I'm really grateful for the Black storytellers who have been really sounding the alarm and making sure that we never forget what happened in New Orleans and Mississippi and other spaces that were hit so hard by Hurricane Katrina. Coming up, we're going to look at some of that harrowing archival footage and just dive deeper into how climate disasters intersect with race, class, and public policy, but also how grassroots organizers in New Orleans are still fighting to protect for how we fill in the gaps when the government is just not sufficient.
Never sufficient, actually. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Before the break, we tried to take a second to really ground us all in some factual data that we knew to be true about Hurricane Katrina during the aftermath and after, during the hurricane and after. And now we're going to play some live footage from Hurricane Katrina, September 2nd, 2005. And hopefully we can get a better sense of how people were responding in real time. This clip is from the WWL-TV Channel 4 affiliate from local news.
What's happening with the evacuees there? We have this report from Trish Regan.
They traveled 350 miles to trade one shelter for another.
Here they were given medical attention, showers, clean clothes, and food to eat. Basics that now seem like luxuries to Jermaine and Rajas Bean.
You know, we've been treated so good, so good. I mean, it's
a breath of fresh air.
You know,
I mean, it feels like something is lifted.
But not everyone here feels relief. Many are still searching for loved ones.
Please call us. Please.
Love you, Grandpa. Love you, Grandpa.
Some, like Tad and Helene Bro, have been lucky.
We're just so happy you are.
Helene gave birth days before Katrina hit, but the child was premature and needed a special baby monitor, which meant they had to leave him in the hospital. The hospital was evacuated, and Tad and Helene had no idea where their 9-day-old child was until now.
Somebody finally called us to say he might be at this hospital, and we called in, and he's there.
He's there?
Yep, he's there.
By nightfall, the dome was full. Cots were taken, and people were growing impatient.
So you arrived here today? Yes, and you haven't been able to lie down? No, not at all.
By the time we got here, it was already filled up.
The lack of consistency. And I think what really jumped out to me about that clip is the range of types of people that were impacted, right? New parents, a single mom who is traveling with her 2 daughters, trying to find contact with her father, who she has no access and communication with, 2 single women, right? A Black family, and just the inconsistency of how folks were treated and the lack of resources that could be evenly distributed across. And then looking at the picture of the Superdome of like hundreds of thousands of bodies.
Right. That was what was so alarming, was seeing everyone packed into that space and people, you know, the gratitude for meals in that sort of environment, but also the like grief of like, call us, we love you, Grandpa. And those who are like, I was able to find them at a hospital, but those who are still waiting to get that kind of news. I mean, it just reminds me, it just feels so shell-shocked.
Yeah, shell-shocked, and it makes you remember that like things in our homes, right? Certain things don't matter nearly as much as like the connections that we have with our family and friends. And like 2005, like people had cell phones, but not nearly to the extent that they have cell phones now, right? People might have remembered a number or two, but like they didn't have access to a payphone. And the fact that it took days for people to get access to water, they had to travel on found. And yeah, I still, it gives me chills watching it. I mean, and I've watched every documentary over the last like 15 years, right? There was one at the 10-year mark. There's one now. And it's the total like just dysfunction of the federal government, inability to respond accordingly, makes it feel very intentional, because we deserve better.
That's definitely how I'm feeling. And I'm also just wondering, like, where are those people now? What happened? Like, did they find Grandpa? Where are those babies? You know, one of the documentaries that I really appreciated, it's not a new one, but it's called Katrina Babies, and it focuses on people who were children during this time, because I mean, this was such a devastating moment for everyone, but thinking of what it means to be a child whose entire world is upended, who's lost family members, who are literally just like floating in the water, who dealt with after fact trauma, who are now adults who have to, you know, relive it as we go through these moments. Over
and over again, every year during the anniversary, right?
Every year.
So next up, we have some footage from Al Jazeera during Hurricane Katrina, specifically focused on how the media was covering some of the incidents that were happening around New Orleans.
Significantly over the last half hour or so. The worst of the storm has now reached New Orleans. This is the moment we've been talking about, dreading.
I'm wondering how long these levees are going to hold on Lake Pontchartrain.
The city absolutely devastated by Katrina.
I'm told that the New Orleans police put out a call to all its officers saying, if you have a boat, bring it here, help us. These are people who did not have the wherewithal to get out of town. They didn't have cars. There's no way they could pay for a hotel room. They stayed in their houses because they had to. And then the water came up. This is life and death. This is life and death. There's just no doubt about it.
I understand anxiety of people on the ground. I just can't imagine what it's like to be waving a sign that says, "Come and get me now." But I want people to know there's a lot of help coming.
You know, maybe help is on the way. The immediate situation is with each passing hour, the situation gets more dire.
The government said, you go in that Superdome and you'll get help. And they didn't get help. They got locked in there.
There was no power, air conditioning, water. Thousands were stranded in wretched conditions.
I want to thank Senator Frist and Senator Reid for their extraordinary efforts.
To listen to politicians thanking each other and complimenting each other, I got to tell you, there are a lot of people here who are very upset.
I want everyone in the world to see 6 days after Katrina swept through this city, 5 days after the levee collapsed, look in the face of the baby.
So many of these people, almost all of them that we see, are so poor and they are so black.
They're showing all these reports of people looting, and they are doing that when people are desperate.
Destruction of the spirit of the people of southern Louisiana and Mississippi may end up being the most tragic loss of all.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
The aftermath of Hurricane Katrina will go down as one of the worst abandonments of Americans on American soil ever in U.S. history.
You need to know that our whole nation cares about you. And in the journey ahead, you're not alone.
Seeing all of that footage followed by George Bush with the platitudes, like, do me a favor, don't give me a pep talk, give people aid. Like, I do not need you on TV and you're buttoned up, like, get in the fields, get in the booth. What?
We could put a man on the moon, but we can't get water to a community within our country for 5 to 6 days. We can't send help for 5 to 6 days. We lock people in a Superdome for days, knowing that they're being piled in with individuals of all walks of life, right? And putting their health, their safety at risk it feels like a social experiment. And even when George Bush, like you saw the interviews, he's almost like smirking. It's very disturbing. That's why
I'm getting chills watching the people. I mean, you have babies in there, bodies face down in the water, people wading through water trying to get help, people sitting with their clothes clinging to them in the Superdome, and then George Bush in a freshly starched pressed suit, and it's like, what is it? And what this footage is not even covering are people who were in jails, prisons, and detention centers.
Yep.
You know, there's footage going viral on TikTok of those who were saying that their incarcerated family members were literally like having to like pry open doors because the people who worked there, the guards, abandoned them in cells that were filling with water. I mean, yeah, that quote that was in the clip just now about this being one of the worst cases of abandonment is so spot on.
Yep. And again, they knew the levees were weak. They knew that the levees were not going to hold. The Lower Ninth Ward had no chance. No chance. And the fact that FEMA had no evacuation plan will never sit right for me. And to Kanye West's point, right? The old Kanye, George Bush did not care about Black folks.
Yeah.
Never did. And this was a prime example that he refused to show resources. I mean, it took years for the rebuilding to really show itself. And New Orleans still, I mean, you still go to parts of New Orleans, you can see the implications of, like, there's still boarded up houses. Like, there's still communities that have not, rebuild. There are still homes that haven't been, and many of those folks who owned homes lost their paperwork in the flood. So they couldn't even prove in many cases that those homes were theirs. It's really disturbing.
Oh, God. Yeah. So our last clip of the day is a trailer from one of the newer documentaries, Hope in High Water, A People's Recovery 20 Years After Hurricane Katrina. This was actually produced or done by Tremaine Lee, an incredible journalist who was on the ground. And we love Tremaine Lee. We got to have him on the show. That's going to happen at some point. But Tremaine was in New Orleans on the ground doing a lot of gun violence journalism when Hurricane Katrina hit and ended up being swept into a lot of the Katrina coverage as well. So let's take a look at that trailer.
This is the simplest version of the poem. I still have air in my lungs, so I need to make use of everything.
It feels like Katrina was yesterday, and then sometimes it feels like it was a dream of another life.
Katrina runs like a long movie in my brain. I take deep breaths because I come from a people who know how to come back, so I will start again. Even though I'm like 27 now, I was like 7 when it happened. Convention center attack. I just remember like being like shoulder to shoulder, people like shoving each other. We lived in the hotel for a year because something without lungs blew the city into a wound.
Katrina was the first time my family ever evacuated. When I saw the water rising at Circle Food Store, which was about 5 blocks from my house, that's when I knew there was something quite beyond expectation or even imagination that was happening in my city.
My city, as mean as a bride mistaken for a widow. My city, always loved because it was a home made of instruments.
You know, it's wild to imagine that 20 years ago, I was just a cub reporter in this city for the Times-Picayune. And I was a police reporter, and I got to know the city, and I got to know the people and the neighborhoods. In those early days when I didn't have any contact to the outside world, no cell phone service, no computers, no laptops, no social media, the only thing I knew to do is keep telling the story. And so to come back to this city time and again, to help amplify the voices of those with the truth, who know the story, who've survived so much, it's an honor and a privilege. There's still problems in the city. There's still holes that need to be filled, right? That is scarred over, let alone totally healed. But even with that, there are people here who are committed to doing the hard work, the work of patching an American city back together.
I happen to serve a community that lives 25 to 30 years less than the white members of the same community.
In order to have a healthy community, we have to have a peaceful community.
20 years later, there is hope.
There's always hope. I think New Orleans is the proof of that.
What I love about Tremaine as a journalist and about this documentary, which people need to watch, is that he always centers people on the ground, and not in a way that is giving like trauma porn or that they, but that it's really about how New Orleans showed up for New Orleans, in spite of so much else, and that Black New Orleans residents are steering their own story. So this was one of the less like heartbreaking trailers and clips to watch for that reason for me.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think, Tremaine is an amazing storyteller. And I think he oftentimes emulates why it's so important to not just have Black journalists, but also people from the community telling the story from the community. Too often our stories have been written by other people, but like, what does it mean for the people who actually were living it to be able to be a part of the story in a way that doesn't just, to your point, like propels this idea of like trauma porn, but also show the resilience, right? I'm oftentimes on the Black diaspora, we also oftentimes see people be like, what is Black culture? What is African-American culture? African-American culture is resilience and finding joy despite. You can add anything next to despite, but we found a way, we find a way. And I think this documentary will help to really showcase that. So we're going to take a quick break. You are watching On the Other Side of Change only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network, what's happening? It's your man, Kim. And look, my new single, Rock With Me, is on fire. We debuted as the #1 most added and greatest gainer at R&B radio. So look, I want you to go check it out at musicbykim.com. Listen to it, download it, tell me what you think about it. Also, make sure you sign up to be a part of my community so we can stay connected. At Music by Kim on all social media platforms. Thank you for rocking with me. And keep love on the one. 'Cause I want you to
with me. We live in a strange world till the darkness falls forever. Baby, let's be the dawn. When it feels like it's taking me over, you're making me stronger, my sweet love.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. There have been countless disasters in the last 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, where we've seen similar patterns of racism and disaster due to capitalism at play. We are doomed to repeat our mistakes when we are unaware of the past and we don't do something to adequately demand for change, utilizing the power that we have.
Yeah. So we have to utilize the power that we had. It's why earlier we talked about it's important to lean into joy. It's also important to not look away from painful moments, from moments of self-advocacy, of collective advocacy. And one of the best ways is to be informed, to not think of these moments as, oh, well, a natural disaster came through and there's nothing that could be done. Because it's not the disaster really that caused most of the trauma. It's the disproportionate and very lacking response. So tune into these documentaries. We showed the trailer for Tremaine Lee's Hope in High Water, A People's Recovery 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. That one is streaming on Peacock, I believe. Spike Lee has multiple Katrina documentaries, the latest one being Katrina Come Hell and High Water, that's streaming on Netflix. And then Ryan Coogler worked with National Geographic to produce Hurricane Katrina Race Against Time, which is streaming on Hulu. There are so many others that you can and should watch. So whatever streaming service you have access to, or if you need to get on YouTube, watch something. Also read books like Michael Eric Dyson's Come Hell or High Water, as well as Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism, which we've talked about in the context of other episodes. But above all, remember that as Jamira mentioned earlier, our investigation and like critique of what happened in New Orleans is supposed to make us better for future moments. So we need to live and learn and demand more from our government, from nonprofits, from private sector about how Black people and Black communities are fought for in moments of crisis.
Especially when it's our tax dollars. So you've been watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Until next time, never stop fighting for a better tomorrow.